Hello, everybody.
Shouldn't you wait a second? We gotta wait for it to load.
Hello, everybody. It's slowly loading in, so we know you're not actually here. We'll give it. No, we're close enough.
All right, cool.
You got to jump the gun a little bit, right?
Yeah,
Don't you?
yeah.
Anyways, welcome everybody to tonight's Esports EDU live chat. I am Carrie, otherwise known as Chuck Muju. It's a very Wednesday for me today. I'm tired. I'm just ready for a 3-day weekend, but I'm in good spirits. I had a Flying Dutchman and fries with chili peppers on them for dinner, so I had comfort dinner tonight.
What's a Flying Dutchman?
A Flying Dutchman is In-N-Out's.
Oh, you don't have to tell me anything else. I'm
Okay.
good. No,
Okay.
for everybody else who might be curious, it's an In-N-Out what now? Something that's not on their menu that you have to have secret code words to get.
Well, I can't eat gluten, so it's 2 meat patties with like onion and cheese. It's me still being able to eat some protein and not having to like the throwaway bun. Anyways, more information than you needed about me tonight. Take it away.
Hi, I'm James O'Hagan. I am the Director of Digital and Virtual Learning for the Racine Unified School District. Also oversee our esports programming, which will be going off here in just a few days with our fall season. And I'm also the host of the Academy of Esports podcast. And I love tonight's episode, Carrie, just because I feel like we're going back in time to April of 2020 when you and I were like, what are we going to do with this pandemic thing? Hey, let's play some games through the day and just try to make ourselves less insane, because this is going to pass soon and everything will be fine in the very near future.
Yeah, and it didn't pass soon.
No.
But
we're here.
We are here. We're here, and it's you and me at the helm today, which it's a throwback to days gone past. I'm kind of excited about tonight as well, because not only do we get to sit and hang out and chat, but this is a topic that I feel like it's rinse and repeat, right? Like we're here to talk about the Activision Blizzard lawsuits. Currently there's a whole slew of them, and some of us have been following it really closely, others haven't. But it's one of those things that, like, we're in it now. Everyone will have forgotten about it in a month or two, but we keep coming here. Like, this is a topic that just keeps showing up, oftentimes with the same companies. So, a really important topic, I think, for us to dive into, because there's definitely split opinions about how you address issues like this when they come up, especially because these are big AAA companies and they do own and operate, some of the esport titles that people play and are really committed to, that have collegiate leagues and pro leagues. So there's a lot to mull about and think about. And I know Sam did post over our social media channels this week, kind of like asking people questions. What do they want to hear about? What do they want to talk about tonight in regards to this? And I know one thing that has come up a bit is how do you respond, since boycotting isn't necessarily the option. So I think that's something, a good conversation to have, maybe, later on after we've kind of talked about what the issue is, because we do need options. We need options for responding to these sort of situations.
Well, and what we also have to realize too in these situations is that a lot of these companies that we're talking about are connected in different ways. One of the main ways that a lot of these companies are all connected, whether you talk about the CEO of Riot or you talk about the CEO of Activision Blizzard or whatever, I still keep coming back to they are all either partially invested or fully invested or owned by one company, and that is Tencent, which is a company in China, which, if you're it's interesting that we have these things happening here, while at the same time Tencent in China is really trying to locking down a lot. The children are not going to be allowed to play more than a few hours. There's a big push, especially in the Chinese government, to again, limit access to play and access time for kids, because they see that there's a bigger issue taking place. But they haven't really put the hammer down on the American side of their corporations or their international corporations, which is very odd and interesting, I think, in that in that sense.
I think it's money and government. You know, when you're looking at a lot of the Asian countries, there is no autonomy when it comes to your video game playing. You have to log in with, you know, personal accounts. In some cases, there's facial recognition technology that goes into it. So there's positive identification. So I don't think you have the same autonomy that you have here. And yeah, you've got a country that's a lot more heavy-handed on you know, some of the negative impacts around gaming, specifically towards youth. Whereas here, I don't know that would fly. You know, you might lose your user base if you were to try and sort of pull that. But
that's not why we're here to talk about Tencent.
No, we're not.
We're going to focus in on the Activision Blizzard, and I want to bring in Riot into this too, because you know, Riot, they had their a couple, as you said, keeps coming around.
Yep.
2 years ago, I felt like we were having this conversation, and then about 6 months ago, they got sued again by the state of California. I know that they've hired people to try to diversify the company and make it look like, hey, look at all these great things we're doing.
Yeah.
But even as they're trying to right the ship, if you will, there still seems to be a real disconnect in the public persona of what they're doing, and lack of questions, I think.
Yeah. So if you haven't been following along with what's going on, or you've just sort of been loosely following along, on July 20th, California Department of Fair Employment and Housing filed their lawsuit against Activision Blizzard, and a lot of that was due to kind of long-term investigations that stemmed from whistleblowers within the company, women within the company that were facing workplace discrimination, sexual harassment, unwanted advancements at work, and generally just an unsafe work environment. And, you know, eventually we ended up seeing some of the statements that came out, and, you know, they were mentioning things like cube crawls, where male employees were just sort of going from cubicle to cubicle and subjecting women to unwanted sexual advances, you know, inappropriate behavior at events. Like there was a lot of really gross stuff that people in Blizzard were being accused of, and not just like one person. The thing that I think really shocked a lot of people is when the news dropped and people started talking. It wasn't like, oh, this person, head of this department. It was, this is an underlying culture. It's prevalent in a lot of the different areas within the company. It's not just the person that's at top. This is a company culture, and it's pervasive. And I think that was shocking for a lot of people to see that was happening, and then to have a state. You know, this wasn't like individuals. We've later had other things come up, because there's not like a small. It's not like there's one lawsuit. You know, you had the California Department of Fair Employment. You also had civil rights agencies. You had U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. You had Labor Union Communication Workers of America, and you had shareholder lawsuits that popped up in August. So you're looking at, I think a total was around 5 different lawsuits and or investigations that are going in relation to these complaints that have come out from various organizations. But to have a state step up and be like, okay, you know, we've been investigating this, we've been seeing the claims coming out, and we need to look into it. I think that was big for people to see that kind of a reaction from a government entity.
Well, let's not think that it's a surprise. If I may, I would like to roll some beautiful bean footage here, if I may. Okay, hold on a second. I'm going to share a screen. I'm going to share a Chrome tab. Okay, so let's bring back this
one. Yeah.
Let's start with this, because I think I could share with the sound coming through.
You should be able to.
Did I?
If you don't?
Yeah, I did.
Okay,
here we go. I think I got it.
I love what you guys done.
Oh, I'm not hearing anything.
I can hear it.
A lot of very
Oh.
strong female characters. However,
I'm glad you can hear it.
I was wondering if we could have some that don't look like they've stepped out of a Victoria's Secrets catalog.
The booing.
What do you mean?
Like I said, I've watched this before, but I can't.
Which catalog would you like them to step out of?
could you see Sylvanas looking any other way? Right. So we feel you, and we want to vary our female characters absolutely. So yeah, we'll pick different catalogs.
Hey,
The
Alex,
uncomfortableness
what
of
catalog is
her,
that, Tauren female coming out
the
of?
look in her face of just, and
Yeah.
And it just gets
Sexy
worse.
cow business. Thank you.
Some sort of agricultural.
Yeah.
again, that sets the stage for all. That's 2010.
Yeah.
So we're talking 11 years ago, 11 plus years ago, that conversation was had, and now people are like, oh, this is so surprising that Activision Blizzard or Riot or anybody is having these issues, because again, we as educators have done such a horrible job of even we love to acknowledge the internet when it works for us, but we hate to acknowledge the whole of the internet and everything that it brings. And again, when social media was cropping up and private networks and private chat rooms were cropping up, we again stuck our head in the sand and said, nope, this has nothing to do with our classroom. This has nothing to do with our students. We're going to choose not to bring it in as conversation pieces because we don't want to invite that scary space where we don't have ultimate control into our classroom.
Yeah. And I think it's an interesting one, because you do get a lot of kickback, when you try and have conversations about these big companies. But yeah, shouldn't be surprising. Like, the writing was on the wall. There's been a lot of behaviors that are definitely not positive that we've seen. And people have tried to say, like, oh, well, you're looking at footage that's 10 years ago. But when you're looking at footage that's 10 years ago, and yet these people are all still in charge, they're all still in charge. That was a public venue that happened at a convention. This was how they felt was an appropriate way to deal with a female player, like a consumer of theirs. I think that says a lot. Like, it says a lot when you have heads of a company that are out there, having these conversations that are just extremely inappropriate to part of their own user base. It speaks volumes as to how they feel about that user.
And it's not just the leadership of the company. Here's the other disgusting part of all this. It's the users. It's the users who will get on their horse. I mean, look at what's the thing? Gamergate. Yeah. Look at the users who will get on and just defense of their favorite game or their favorite company or their whatever. And anybody who speaks out against or challenges, I guess, the leadership or the status quo gets not only shouted down, they get doxxed. They get horrible. I mean, to the point where if you look into Gamergate, it's this awful situation where this woman just called out, some of the inequities and the issues, and was just vilified for. I don't know if it's still going on. I mean, she probably still gets hate and messages to this day because of all the things that happened. But it's hard too when you're at that conference, and I think AJ put it in chat about the booing. I think you said the booing, and it wasn't just people going yes, we need to do this. No, it was the crowd saying heck no.
Yeah, it's that you have no space, and I think, like, when we're talking about specifically how that what that woman was responding to, you've got a. I'm trying to see if this is going to pop up. If it will. It's way. I can't pop up one window.
All the windows.
I know, all the windows.
We're getting meta here, people.
And my computer's like, no, I can't get the one window to go. So let me do one tab. So
do you want? Oh, do you want me to bring it up? Or are you good?
Yeah, if you can, because my computer's being weird.
Watch me do this.
You've got the magic touch that I do not have today.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
My brain is.
Is this what we're talking about?
Yeah. Let's just go for there. It's a conversation that women have a lot about, how female characters, female identifying characters, are portrayed in a lot of video games. And, this woman's particular comment was pertaining to World of Warcraft. Many of us have played World of Warcraft. It's kind of one of those games that is sort of a staple in the gamer community. I think we can all pretty much acknowledge that a lot of the female characters are pretty scantily clad.
How is that going to defend anything, too? Oh my gosh! No,
it doesn't. So looking at the unreal proportions, what they put women in, it's a valid concern, and it's something that I've brought up to many people in the esports community. Like, if this is the title that you're playing, and this is the female representation that you're putting out there, it's a very clear message to your female identifying players, and it's not one of empowerment, it's one of objectification. And sexualization. And so we need to take a step back and acknowledge that. And, you end up more often than not getting a kickback. Like, people get upset about it. It's like, hey, don't get mad because this is what it's like. Just hear and understand that the female perspective is this. Like, this is designed for the male gaze. If you aren't familiar with male gaze and how it pertains to video games, Google it.
I'm doing that right now.
Okay, because a lot of games are designed for male gaze, which means you're going to have very particular outfits designed for your female characters. Your female characters are going to be physically styled in particular ways with their body types, and camera angles are going to be different for female characters than they are for male characters in a lot of instances. That's why in a lot of cases, especially in promo footage, you see female characters facing away from the screen with a camera that's an upshot from their back end, or you see women that are facing the screen with a down shot towards their cleavage. Like, this gaze it drives promotional imagery. It drives the cinematic cutscenes. It's really prevalent, and you can easily tell if a game is designed to be marketed to either men or women by what the gaze is set at. Is it a male gaze? If it's a male gaze, this is not a game that has been designed or marketed for women. Even games like Fortnite definitely apply male gaze to it.
Right.
In both the marketing,
League of Legends.
Yep. In the marketing, in the stylization, in the female character builds, like it's all there. So when you say well, we're inviting the girls in, it's a really colorful game, it's cartoony, there's female characters, that does not mean that representation is quality. It does not mean it's quality. You need to stop and take a look at the gaze and see whether where that marketing lies.
And just for the audience, I did. If Sam, you can put I just went to the Wikipedia because I didn't this is a term I had not heard before until Carrie just introduced it to me. So thank you, Carrie. The term is male gaze is the act of depicting women and the world in the visual arts and in literature from a masculine, heterosexual perspective that presents and represents women as sexual objects for the pleasure of heterosexual male viewer. And that doesn't just go for video games. That goes back forever, basically, in the form of depiction of art or music or video, movies or whatever.
Even writing, books are written through the male gaze. It's a very real thing. It's extremely prevalent in video games, cinema. So it's important that we're aware of it. World of Warcraft has a lot of female users. Ash just said there's the data on it. Last number I knew, I think women were 35% of World of Warcraft players. I don't know if it's raised or lowered since then. But it's still a community that can be toxic. From what I've heard, women that play in the higher level groups have less issue than women that play in lower ranked. I
have a good friend who is a very, very high level World of Warcraft player, and she's never indicated to me that she's ever had any issues. Probably because she could smite everything by herself in the game if anybody gives her a side eye or whatever.
That's what I've heard. The higher level you are, the safer it is to be female identified.
Okay. But what we also have to, let's also talk about this too, because one of the things also, and I know one of our co-hosts that we typically have on, AJ, is a cosplayer. There's also cosplay involved in this too. It isn't just the game itself. It's people dressing up as these characters to go to get to shows, which
And that's your only option. Yeah.
well, not is it, but here's the thing. Because again, if people, the developers look at this and go, well, look at all these girls who dress up like this, who come to our gaming conventions, or the men who see this and think, well, this is totally fine because look at all these girls who's dressed up as this. Right. It's a very mixed message too in the community, which can lead to, again, some very raised eyes.
Yeah, there's a thing that you've got to look at when it comes to video game characters. If most of the, and I'm going to say attractive here, not physically, but if most of the appealing or attractive characters to cosplay, because they've got a storyline, they've got character development, if they are scantily clad, that's just a drawback. Like you're going to cosplay the characters that you have an attachment to. You probably don't have an attachment to the one chick that stands outside of the pumpkin farm and gives you a quest to kill wolves. Like, even though she's wearing a full-on dress, you're not going to cosplay as her. You're going to cosplay as somebody else that is, either a villain or a hero that has a story arc attached to them. And generally, if they're female, they're going to be sexualized, which means your options to cosplay are limited. And then as a woman, if you don't cosplay it accurately enough, you get slammed and harassed for it, which means it's got to be suggestive. If it's too suggestive, you get slammed and slammed for it because you're slutting up the character and you're like subverting, the game message, even though you might be wearing exactly like what the character were to wear. And if you were to go and change, like if you're going to change the outfits that we had up on the screen, people are going to call you out about it because it's not authentic. So you're sort of stuck, like, unless you happen to play, like if you play Rainbow Six Siege, you're blessed with a lot of really strong non-sexualized female characters. Really?
It's a game I've never played before.
Oh, I love Rainbow Six Siege. The first time I saw one of the female operators, like, squealed because she was like in full flak gear. She was not like, you're like, okay, yeah, it's a chick, but none of the regular chick trappings were attached to her. Like, she looked like a woman that was ready to go in, bust in some doors, and kick some butt. And she was dressed appropriately. She, hair was not super styled. I feel like that franchise has done a really good job at allowing people to have female identifying characters, queer characters, that just fit into everything else. You can line them all up and nobody stands out. You're not like, oh, well, look at that. Their flak jackets aren't like pasties. They're like real flak jackets.
You're not wearing a midriff, you mean?
No. And sometimes I think Call of Duty had a few, female characters in some of the games, and you watch the promo footage and you have to you're like, wait, I think that was a girl. But it's not overt because they're not dressing them up and over feminizing them. They're not sexualizing them. So they allow those characters to just be women in combat situations, which a lot of women love, because that's what we want. We want real representations of femme-identifying individuals, and that doesn't include running around in little gold bras.
And here's the thing. We think that, again, I don't want to create this to be just a problem that is in video games, because it's not, as we were talking about male gaze, but it's one of the things that I go back to, because I've started redoing this, thank gosh, for, everybody loves Marvel, right? Oh, the Avengers movies, everybody loves everything about Stan Lee. Oh, what a nice guy.
So the Hawkeye Initiative?
Well, here's the thing, is as you start to look back, like I started reading a lot of these older Marvel comics, right? There is so much sexual harassment and sexual objectification of women in comics from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even more recently. And nobody thinks of Marvel as this company that would do anything. I mean, gosh, they have the Avengers movies. They're owned by Disney. But if you look back at their history, Stan Lee passed away. He never had to answer the question of how did you balance the sexual the sexualization of women in your comics. I mean, straight up, I'm reading an old G.I. Joe comic from say mid 80s, right? There is a straight up sexual harassment going on. Like one guy to one Scarlet is the character in the G.I. Joe comic, and the guy is constantly, and it's like a theme through the comics that this guy is constantly trying to get with her, and she wants nothing to do with him, but just won't take no. I don't want to make this seem like this is just a video game thing, because me growing up, and you know, our parents bought us comic books. Never thought anything. This is comics, big deal. Never thought that at the same time I was being conditioned to believe that when a girl said no, because I'm reading this in my G.I. Joe comics, that there was going to be that was a bad thing. Because in the comics, it's just like, oh, she's going to threaten to punch me in the face, and I'll just walk away and I'll try again later.
Yeah, it's
but nobody could ask Stan Lee anymore, hey, how do you balance the sexual harassment that you perpetuated from women in the comics that you were the editor-in-chief of? You were the owner of the company. You had ultimate say over what was presented in those comics. Yeah. What we're seeing now is just like what you were just describing, except now it's in video game form instead of a comic book.
Well, and it's like it's in everything. The Hawkeye Initiative is attached to comic books, because if you're used to reading comics, women are often portrayed graphically in ways that are, one, not physically possible, two, not physiologically like accurate or correct. And so there was this movement of, well, when in doubt, take that pose, take those proportions.
Oh, I love this.
Instead of having it be, you know, the Black Widow, make it Hawkeye. And, you know, as soon as you see Hawkeye in these poses, you're like, wow, no, okay, no. And it's like, yeah, women can't bend that way either. We have the same skeletal structure, roughly. Like, you know, we don't have extra joints in places to allow our backs to kick up in that position, or our hips to tilt that way. Like, that isn't real. Though,
wait, I will say the Todd McFarlane Spider-Man series, that was like his claim to fame, was he would make all of his characters like looking at Spider-Man going, no, our hips would just separate from our pelvises if you did that to the leg, you know, kind of thing. So maybe he gets a pass because he did it to everybody in his comics.
Well, I mean, and that's an intentional move. That's a statement right there. So it's not just video games. You know, culturally, we're still living in a society that has baked in misogyny. Like, it's there, and it's in everything. It's in your marketing, it's in your advertisement, it's in the pink tax, it's in our video games, it's in our comic books, it's in our TV shows. It's now everywhere.
It's in our schools.
It's been in our schools the whole damn time.
But we invited in another layer into our schools now, and I think that's where there's a lot of great questions that have come up, because again, I started the chant. I don't know what happened in early March 2020 when I said, hey, there's this letter to Riot. We need to band together. And we got like 400 people to sign, but something else was going on in the world that really kind of distracted a lot of people at the time. But we had over 400 signatures on a letter to Riot, not about the sexualization, but about the access to participation. But let's not forget, too, that, again, as we look at League of Legends, you know, one of the issues that I do have is what we're talking about is the sexualization of women.
Yeah, and absolutely.
I guess the questions that we started to see when Sam was posting up the preview for this episode was, well, where or how or when do we draw the line?
Yeah, and I think that's an important conversation, because unless you want to be part of the problem, and want to really alienate female identifying players, it's a conversation that we have to have, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have the ability to drop a game as big as League of Legends.
Right.
And I think, for me, one of the conversations that I feel like we need to start having, because you get that kickback, well, we can't drop this title. I think one of the conversations that needs to start being had is, like, why are we married to the titles that there is a pro league? Like, I get, you know, that everybody's like, well, It's the pathway. It's the road to pro, the path to pro. But as educators, is that really our job? Like, is our job to feed the pros, knowing that 99% of our students are never going to become pro? I mean, you don't build out your high school football team, with the intention that all of you are going to be professionals. We have to do it this way because that's how the NFL does it. Like, that's not it. It's not it. Yes, there's really big, like, football pride, but I don't think any coach operates their program like this is your path to financial security. You're going to go to college. You're going to be picked up on a college team. Of course, that's going to happen. And then you're going to make it pro afterwards. But in the esports world, we sort of seem to have this ideology that, starting as early as middle school, you can really only play the titles that are going to lead you to the pro level. Like, and that's a small smattering of games. But you've got to play them in middle school because you got to look good for your high school and you got to make the team. And then you have to play those exclusively in high school, because if you don't do that, how are you going to get recruited to the college? And, you've got to play on your college team because that's how you're going to get recruited by, one of these pro level teams. So I think for me, one of the first conversations that we need to start having is as educators, why are we married to pro titles? Like, why can't we diversify? Are we really serving our students as best we can if we lock them into these titles, especially if these titles are problematic? It doesn't allow you a whole lot of freedom. And even just looking at League of Legends, regardless of what's going on with lawsuits, there's insecurity around titles where the leagues are owned and operated by the game company. Any game has stability issues in regards to patch cycles and all that, but look at what's happening with Overwatch 2. You've got people that were like plunged into this panic of what's going to happen with the next season, because there's going to be this gap. Always been the side of collegiate as a path to pro play. It's a path to an esports career. Yeah.
AJ's got AJ, who was a collegiate coach. She's got it. I mean, it's not a path. Chances are, look, if you're going to be a pro, they're going to snag you before college anyway. They're not going to snag you after college.
No, you're too old by then.
You've missed all your great years, and you're right too. But again, the thing that I come up against is I have some of the most socially conscious students in my program that I'm sure everybody does, right? But there's like a disconnect between the game that they love, and then you present them with these facts and this information, and they're kind of like, well, that's fine, but we're still playing the game. It's so hard. It's a conversation that is so much deeper than just showing people facts. Like, oh my gosh, could we just have a conversation around the facts in this country for a little bit? No. Everything is always about, well, I'm going to do my own research. The thing I love is like, the person who says, "Oh, I've done my own research," and you say, "Well, in your senior year in high school, I remember you asking if Paris was in Italy or Europe." So it's, I don't know how we as educators, other than just unilaterally saying, no, we aren't playing this game anymore. But what does that then leave as a competitive landscape? Because we want to have competitive in our schools. We want to be sustainable. So there's
I think there's ways around it. So I think if you're staying with it, which, running the news cycle, seeing how many people rolled into fall with League of Legends, like, people didn't skip a beat. Like, there are these titles, they're there. I think you have to start having honest conversations about what's going on and baking that into your esports program at every age level in a way that's appropriate for that age level. So like you Googled male gaze. That shouldn't be something that's a new terminology. Like, that should be something that we talk about, especially when things like this happen with like Activision Blizzard. One of their games is definitely designed with the male gaze in mind. So let's have a conversation about that. Like, why aren't we adding that into our education or curriculum? Because just saying, oh, well, there's sexism, The people who work there experience this, and the games are built like this. If you were a young male gamer, that doesn't mean anything. But if you break it apart and you look at it and you take it and you're like, okay, look how the women are filmed, look how they're dressed, look how, look at their storylines, look how their bodies move on screen. You would hope that it would start to make more sense and start to see how pervasive it is. Because if it's not relevant to you, you might completely glance over it and not even see that that's how it's designed. So start having those conversations, and then having conversations with women in the room. Like, well, how does it make you feel if these are your only options? What does that say about your value as a human? If this is how the game is like valuing you.
What's interesting is that even today, Riot did promote Naz, I hope I say this name right, El Tala, to head of the global head of League of Legends esports. Again, there's so many things here about, even virtue signaling. Again, where you take somebody and you say, oh, look, this person we're aligned with, though. Don't you see this? And I'm not saying she doesn't have the talent because she's put in the work, but damn, you just gotta, now everything is a second guess of some of these companies. What is your motive? Is the motive legit and real, or is the motive just to have a press release that says, look what we're doing?
Until you actually start seeing those men at the top, those men that were at the table, not have a place in the games industry, I think you're probably not going to see any real change. Even looking at some of the press that's come out regarding the lawsuits, you'll have these conversations or these public facing statements that look really like positive, like, okay, yeah, we have to take a hard look at the company. But then you get to a bottom thing and it's like, well, just to clarify, all the legal documentation, Blizzard, Activision clearly states that they feel that the lawsuit is frivolous and they are not guilty of these actions and everything's unwarranted. So, like, the public face is, we're going to take a hard look, we're going to make some changes, we're implementing change, but then, like, the legal entity is sitting there going, we didn't do this. This isn't justified. Like, they even had people in their own staff come out and make statements along that lines, like, this is all blown out of proportion. This doesn't really reflect who we are now. Like, clearly,
it does.
Well, when you have a walkout and you have, large chunks of your staff write a letter to, the heads of your company, like, this is what we want in place. Clearly it still represents you. Like, clearly those issues are still there. Your staff speak volumes.
And again, as Fiona has said, even about to the point of Naz's appointment to global head of League of Legends esports, even in her success, she's impacted by this because her legitimacy is questioned. Because, as you said, the people are still there, the heads are still there, the ones who are making the decisions. These are the same people making the same decisions. So what? I'm supposed to trust the decision of the sexist, misogynistic male who is now going to put the female in the position because now all of a sudden they had their come to Jesus moment or whatever we want to call it, and they're just going to say, oh, all of a sudden I found that I was no. I've never heard them say I was wrong. I've never heard them say I'm wrong. I'm sorry. We're going to do away with. Let's not forget. Let's not gloss over the still intact arbitration that many of these people were forced into. Not arbitration by an independent arbiter. No. An arbiter hired by the company to arbitrate the cases of harassment that are brought against. You can't say, look at all these things we've done, and you're still running things through an arbitration process that is yours. You're still in the power position. You're still in the leadership role. You are still driving the ship, even though for the longest time you showed that you, given the keys to a Lamborghini, you're going to drive at 100 miles an hour and not give a damn about anybody else.
Yeah, it's problematic. But I think it was Fiona might have said something about, like, you're not going to make change if you just keep making it about the game. Like,
right.
And I think that as an educator, that's the key thing. Like, if you're in a position where you can say, okay, enough, like, your company is just too problematic, we've got to step back. Like, we want to create a safe place for our players. then do it. That's great. I know there are people who have. I know there are programs that didn't start the fall with League of Legends and probably won't.
And I want to just say before you go too deep into that, we did run League of Legends last spring, but I did it for two reasons. Number one, I did have students who, again, are still very invested. They see it as their game, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to give them an opportunity to have, rather than just pulling the rug out from underneath them, have one more opportunity to play this game. Let's transition off of this. Let's go to something else.
Yeah.
But the other one, too, is I just wanted to stick it to Riot one time and say, look, I can run a whole season without calling it a season, and This is how we're going to do it, following your rules. But it's going to take state associations as a whole to very publicly, either in mass or in large groups, say, we're not doing this anymore. That's the only thing I can think of, because me just saying it isn't enough. You just saying it isn't enough. But for whole state associations to say, we are not doing this game anymore because of these things. But that, I mean, between Rocket League and Super Smash Brothers, the two big ones we've got are Overwatch and League of Legends. And even, you know what? Let's not push Smite under the let's not push them under the rug, because they also have a problem with sexualized characters in their game.
Yeah, they do.
I know a lot of people went to Smite last year, but Smite is another one that has a lot of the same visual issues that a lot of these other games have.
Absolutely they do.
It's just they said, here, use our game, please.
Yeah. No, I mean, you do have options. They're not ones that are predominantly used. Brawlhalla is pretty good at creating cartoony characters that aren't over sexualized, but a lot of people don't play Brawlhalla outside of middle school, so there's some limitations there. But we keep coming back to that conversation of like those big titles. We bring it up a lot because even without having the lawsuit on the table, they don't appeal to the widest group of students anyways. If we just stay to this handful of games that are really heavily marketed to young white men, we're still eliminating, a lot of the population that we could be bringing into our game. So yeah, it doesn't hurt to look for, some other titles that also have great representation, but to diversify your programs, not just to make female identifying players feel safer and more welcomed, but to include more populations of color, to include your LGBTQ students. That diversity in your game titles is really going to open up and create more space for a wider, more diverse student body.
Well, I haven't had this happen yet, but I haven't had a parent who comes to me and says, it might have happened to somebody else. And if somebody else has had this happen, please say this in chat, tell us in chat. But I have not yet had a parent come to me objecting to the game titles themselves or objecting to the company itself. But I have every belief that that day is coming. And how I answer that question could either set off everything's fine in the esports program, or it could very well start to be the beginning of the end for a lot of esports programs.
Yeah, especially when you're looking at creating safe spaces for underrepresented populations. When you've got parents that are going to come in fighting for their child's safety and ability to fit in, they're gonna want real answers and real interaction. And saying like, well, we're playing this game because the pros do or because the colleges do, probably isn't going to be an answer that's going to sit well with a parent that's watching their child come home uncomfortable. That's not what they're looking for.
Which is a shame, because the whole reason that a lot of us are doing this is because we're reaching out to those kids on those margins. We're reaching out to those kids who aren't engaged. One of the biggest parallels that I guess you could say is that, for example, football, baseball, basketball, whatever our traditional sports are, for whatever reason, those did not appeal to kids. This does. It's kind of like how in the library system that I oversee, I really pushed hard for us to get away from just the Caldecott and the winning books.
Yeah.
And I have some great librarians who have filled our libraries with materials that help kids, especially at the elementary, middle, and people usually think about this only in high school, but elementary and middle, of just having something that they can pick up and read and they can self-identify.
Yeah.
A lot of times our libraries for kids who are, again, are struggling with identity issues don't necessarily see themselves even in the books that they can get at their school library.
Yeah.
So how are we, again, I want to create something that is sustainable, number one, but I also want to create something that is welcoming. The invitation has to be there.
Yeah.
And again, with our Wisconsin association, did we hit on that when we launched? No. And I'll say that out front. And it's not I'm not doing this to call out Mike, because again, I was part of this group, but we did fall into the white male focused games. We fell into the League of Legends, Rocket League. Well, let's see, did we do Rocket League? Yeah, Rocket League, Smash Brothers, and Overwatch. Only now are we at a NBA 2K, which Mike and I talked about what a dumpster fire that was. I'm sorry again. We're fixing that. But even some titles that, we got to talk about sustainability being number one. How do I sustain a program if nobody plays? Well, there's a few ways. Again, we could have just gaming clubs. We could run it internal to our own district. We don't have to play anybody outside. I want to have a competitive game experience for everybody who wants a competitive game experience for whatever title they want that to be.
And honestly, you're still preparing them for collegiate level. Like having my child who played after hours, having the ability to learn skills in school would have been great, but he was still putting in the work at home. I think it's important in the education setting to do the education. Like maybe take a step back, insert education on, game development. Let's look at those companies. Let's look at their track record. How do we feel about that? Is that what we should be seeing? Should we be pushing for change? How do we push for change? Looking at how games are designed, helping students understand, the marketing, because every single product is marketed. Your esports program is marketed. We brought that up on a past show. Like even the equipment that you use, creates a tone and is marketed to a particular individual, and looking at content, like how is this for other people? Like you start bringing kids into the conversation and talk about the bad points of the games they play. Doesn't mean you can't love the game. Like you can still love a game and go, look, the studio's doing great things here, and here. Because let's face it, like Riot has some cool initiatives that sometimes happen. So does Blizzard. Like it's not that these companies aren't doing really cool innovative things and aren't supporting different populations. They are. So here are the things that we appreciate about this company, but here are the things that they've got really wrong right now. Like, and that doesn't mean that they can't fix them, but they're gonna require some pressure to fix them. How do we help with that? The gaming community has a really hard time looking at a title, looking at a company that they're invested in, and taking off the rose-colored glasses and being like, yeah, you know what? I love this game, but currently this company is a dumpster fire. And these issues are really problematic. They're affecting large populations of their player base. Like, how do we have that conversation? And just, getting to the point where you can acknowledge it. Because if you get to the point where the player base can acknowledge it, then when someone comes forward and they're like, oh my gosh, this happened to me here, it's not, I've got to defend my game. I've got to defend my company. It's like, yeah, that's unfortunate. Like, we've been hearing more of that. Like, I really love the game. I'm really upset that this is what you're experiencing, playing it or working on it. How can we help get this game and this company where we want to see it? Like, we need to start teaching kids how to do that. Like,
well, you've led by great example in this realm too, Carrie. Let's not forget, because a game that is very near and dear to your heart, and I know you've spent not just time with yourself, but really embedding yourself in the culture. I remember you speaking very positively about this company's practices for, taking on toxicity in the space. But the creators of Sea of Thieves, I mean, this was something you did with your dad. I mean, this was something that you've invested so much personal energy into, and it was just like you said, it was just all of a sudden just snatched away from you because you couldn't square the reality. What exactly, if you could remind everybody, what was what happened with
there started to be, like with a lot of games, especially games that feature combat, there can be a burbling of toxicity that happens within the community. They did a really cool move, and they created a creator, crew, and a partner program, which basically takes people and really tightly associates them with the company, especially at a partner level. You know, you're part of a company Discord, your content gets featured on websites, you get invited to, you know, sponsored events. So the company is very attached to like the partner program. Like it's to me, it's a very clear, like, direct representation. And they pulled in some people to the partnership program that behaved very poorly in certain, you know, sponsored events, and other partners were targeted, harassed, misgendered. Like it got really dirty. Then it rolled into the partner Discord. People ended up getting doxxed. There were death threats made. People's personal information was being, you know, kind of thrown out there. Other partners were live streaming their responses to all of this and attacking each other. Like it just blew up, and nobody was handling themselves right. Like there were a few people that were like, okay, this is inappropriate. I'm stepping back. I'm dropping my partnership. I'm done. But a lot of like partners on each side played dirty, and the company did nothing publicly. It wasn't ever addressed. You know, when I asked about it, we were told we were going to get, you know, some feedback. I started doing some research, found out that there were never, like, you know, specific behavior expectations or code of conducts in place for the partners outside of the code of conduct for the video game itself, which is going to be really hard to you know, maintain or adhere. There wasn't code of conduct in place for the Discord, so while people were being attacked in the Discord, there was nothing in place to say, like, this what you're doing right now is a bannable offense, or you could get your partnership removed. None of that was in place, and as far as I know, it still isn't. So it caused, in trying to do something really cool, they created an unsafe environment for their partners. They were warned that this was potentially going to be a problem because people saw the two different sides of the community sort of starting to pop off, and it went off like a powder keg. After, I want to say, like a month and a half, 2 months of not getting a response from the company, I backed out. You know, I loved the game, but being as deep in the community as I was, I publicly came out and said, like, hey, I love the game. I love the developers. I still am connected with tons of the developers. But I needed something more, like something needed to change. And I expected to be gone like a matter of weeks. I didn't expect to be gone for like a year. I would say that lately, Rare has been putting, I think, more of an effort into lifting up more of their community. So not just these sort of toxic PvP players. They've been doing, you know, taking good steps to highlight the artists that are in the community, the craftsmen in the community. So they're really starting to do work to level the playing field. I still haven't seen any announcements for the partner program, but I feel like the effort is going in a good direction with them. But yeah, it was, I mean, you know, I talked to you. It was heartbreaking walking away. Walking away.
It's like losing a friend.
It really is. When you're part of a community, it's part of what you do. Like, my dad and I have only started playing offline within just a couple weeks ago. And even that was hard. Like, there was a lot of conversations that had about, is this okay for us to come back? Has there been enough change? You know, do we come back, but do we stream it? Like, so we play personally. But it's weird. It's a lot. Like, and you got to make hard decisions.
Well, it's great that you have that the ability to reach out. Again, you said you're still connected to some of the developers. What I want to make sure people realize too is some of these companies do have groups that are kind of advisors. So, for example, I don't think Activision Blizzard has one, but Riot has the Riot Scholastic, the RSAA. If you look up RSAA Riot, you'll find it. Those are people who have direct contact into Riot as part of an advisory board. Now, if Riot takes their advice, that's one thing, but at least I know that they're going to have a new board member who's an amazing ally of ours. I can't say who because I don't think it's been publicly announced yet, but it's somebody who just is an amazing ally and will, I hope, shake something up. Or again, it could just be an association that is just there to be good on paper, but are they going to actually take the advice of the people who are on there? Because there's some brilliant people on the RSAA, including one of them was TL Taylor, who, if you don't know who TL Taylor is, oh my gosh, look up TL. TL, I guess you could say, if there was ever helped, I think, form AnyKey, I think was like either a founder or a co-founder of AnyKey, but has been on there for a number of years and doesn't always necessarily understand the K-12 space. These people don't always understand those things right away. I had a conversation with TL when I wrote the letter a year and a half ago. TL reached out to me and we talked about what that letter meant. So there is some ways that you can get a voice, at least through Riot. I don't think Activision Blizzard has one. Epic Games has done a pretty good job, I think, with starting to reach out. But if you don't know who to reach out to and you have educational questions, contact Steve Isaacs. Just Steve is at the company. Contact Steve Isaacs. If you're having issues with Minecraft, or let's say Microsoft has something that you're like, doesn't square with the community, Stephen Reed is now working at Microsoft. There are these people that you can reach out to who can bring bigger voices into the space, but you have to make sure you don't just sit back. I think one of the things was a tweet that went out, something of, outside of just yelling at the sky or putting it into Twitter, what do we do? Start using your networks. If you don't have a network, find somebody who can connect in and use those connections. Because again, educators like us, we should have a seat at the table. And for a lot of these companies, we don't, because they don't know what the education world is scary to them for some reason. We're not that scary. We want to be your ally. Microsoft and Google and Apple figured out a long time ago, and they make a ton of money off of education because they figured it out a long time ago by inviting us into the space with them.
Yeah.
Oh, Ashley, I think, is trying to move us along on our final thoughts.
We do. We are ready. It is final thoughts time.
Sorry. Thank you, Ashley, for keeping close to the time.
We could just keep going.
We have done that before, you and I.
We have. Yeah. Just go.
Final thought for me. Let's continue the conversation, not just in Twitter. LinkedIn is another great way to reach out to some of these people, to connect with some of these people. If you do just a simple search of, say, for example, Activision or Blizzard or Riot, you'll get a list of people. If you're not using your LinkedIn, again, keep it professional. This isn't Twitter. You're reaching out in a professional sense, but reach out to some of these people, try to connect with them, tag them in posts if you feel that it is relevant to the work that they're doing. We're not trying to be slanderous. We're not trying to be libelous. What we're trying to do is, again, educate them about the amazing opportunity that we have in our sphere. So let's invite them in. And again, if parents are coming at you with concerns about some of the titles, listen to their concerns and share those with those company leaders as well, too.
And I think for me, like, keeping things constructive, remembering that, as you get ready to have that rally cry, not everybody at these companies are bad people.
No.
Oftentimes it's a select few. There are great people on the crew. There's great people, in the development teams, in the organizations. So don't feel like you have to burn bridges. It's okay to disagree with a decision somebody's made and still value that person. Same thing with a company. It's okay to be horrified at something that's happening and still be like, okay, I want to help you guys do better. So this is the change I'm going to push for. But in order to be a positive push, it has to be constructive. You can't just go on a warpath shooting burning arrows at people. You've got to be like, these are the points that are concerning. This is why it's concerning. Here's some things that we would like to see to make a change. That's actionable. Think of actionable things. Don't just go attacking.
And don't assume you know the landscape, because just like in a large school district, weird decisions get made all the time that you're like, well, wait a second, who made this call? And again, it's not always the person you would think is making the call sometimes.
Absolutely.
So,
especially when you're looking at companies that are owned by other companies. There's sometimes things where their hands are tied and they can't do anything about it. So yeah, be careful who you get mad at. But yeah, everybody, thank you for joining us. We will be back next Thursday. I did not look ahead to see what our topic is for next Thursday, but we have a topic. It will be announced probably within the next day or two, and we'll be doing the same thing we did this week, where we will be announcing our topic and giving you guys the opportunity to ask questions or providing feedback. That way, when we come back in next Wednesday, I was going to say Thursday.
I know, it's so hard still. I'm like, is it? Oh, wait, tomorrow? No, tomorrow's not Friday. Of course, most of the today I was going on, today was Tuesday. So.
Oh. Well, you're one day closer to the end. So
I am.
That's good. Anyways, everybody, have a good night, and we will see you all later. Bye, everyone.
Take care.